would like to share a few thoughts on the theme for the conference, and that is succession planning. And it's interesting that we chose this theme because it's even more relevant today than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I trust that for each one of us, we will find something in this theme that would help us as we build our organizations. Let me start with a very interesting experience for all Ghanaian football lovers, because on the 14th of April, 1993, Ghana traveled to Germany to take on the mighty Germany national team in a town called Bochum. Now, that match was played in very high spirits, and in those days, we didn't have Facebook, Twitter, we didn't have social media, and so we were watching a delayed telecast of the match. And Ghana played extremely well for the first 69 minutes, containing the Germans, and in the 69th minute, Ghana scored. And we jumped up and started running in the streets and said, today we will beat the Germans. And we were very excited because our first team looked quite strong and looked capable of winning the match. So while we were running across the streets in front of our house, somebody saw us and said, no, we lost the match very heavily. We said, you must be joking. This match is live. So we went back with mixed feelings, but something very interesting happened. Right after we scored our first goal, a particular left fullback decided he was injured because of a dispute at halftime over bonuses, apparently. And so he left the pitch and was substituted by a young man who was a beginner in that department of the game. When he came on board, the Germans saw a loophole in that particular part of the pitch. And so out of 11 players, that was where the loophole was. And for the next 21 minutes, the Germans directed all their effort to that one small loophole. And at the end of the match, true to the prediction of the person we saw on the streets, Ghana lost by a heavy margin of 6-1. The mystery by which in the first 69 minutes we were leading by 1 goal, and in 21 minutes we conceded 6 goals, is a subject matter that could easily find its way into a discussion about succession planning. Why? Because when we fail to build capacity in all our key areas of operation, our organizations become vulnerable. And so let me give you a definition of succession planning, two definitions that I came across. The first one says, it's a process whereby an organization ensures that employees are recruited and developed to fill each key role within the company. So if your company has roles like marketing, human relations, operations, information technology, our role in succession planning is to ensure that in each of these compartments or departments of the business, we have somebody capable to fill the role. Additionally, it's also to ensure that should anyone in any of those roles not be available, there should be somebody to step in that will provide equal firepower and not be like the Bochum disaster, as we came to call it afterwards. So it guarantees that no key role will be open for which another employee cannot step in prepared to play the role. I juxtapose that one against a second definition that I found that says succession planning is really a subset of the whole talent management process. And in that regard, it aims to attract the best talent, retain those individuals, and develop them through a well-targeted developmental effort or efforts. Now, overall, as a result of this, it helps build bench strength to ensure that the organization has long-term health, growth, and stability. So putting these two definitions together, I want to believe that the 3 words I've highlighted are the 3 key words in every succession planning activity or endeavor. And the three key words, one is attract, two is retain, and three is to develop. So putting those three words together again, I would say that a succession planning framework must have three legs in a stool. A three-legged stool that must have each of the legs present, without which it cannot stand on its own. So, what are the three legs? One is recruitment, and that stands for continuity. Two is retention, and that ensures consistency. And three is development, that ensures capacity. So across board, if we take this project seriously, whether we are a football club or a political party or a business or any other field of endeavor, we will ensure that there is continuity, there is consistency, and there is capacity. And that is what succession planning encompasses. In my main field of endeavor as a pastor, I try to distill management lessons from the scripture and ask myself, on Sundays, how many economics, financial, and management lessons do we see when we sit in the pews in church or when we stand behind the pulpits in church? And so I just decided to find three examples of failed succession from the scriptures just to serve it to us for dinner today, if that's okay with you. Is that okay? Three lessons that we can take away. So the first one is about wrong criteria for selection. I call them the scriptural dilemmas in succession planning. The first one was just using the wrong criteria, and that is about when the prophet Samuel went to David's house, ostensibly sent by God to appoint a king of Israel. And so when he got there, he greeted Jesse, the father of David, and said, "I've come to appoint a king from your sons." Now, it's a dilemma that every CEO goes through, because Jesse brought out what he thought was his best, the firstborn, Harvard trained, tall, looking good, nicely trimmed mustache, and everything. He said, "This is the one." Interestingly, Samuel said, "Excellent, everything is fixed. Appearance great, looks good, talks well." And then God said, "That's not the one." They went through all the sons and all the seven, and none of them was the appointed one. And then he asked, "Do you have any other one?" He said, "Oh, no, that's all." Yes, there's one B, but I'm not sure you would even like to see him. Because typically, for every one of us making a choice for somebody to fill a role, sometimes we use our own criteria that we think really captures all that we need to see. And so, how well they look, how well they talk, and a lot of other things come to play. But ultimately, a young person who was working there in the factory, hidden from sight, not in the big PR forefront, was the one who would ultimately be the chosen one. The lesson in that for all of us is that appearance can be deceptive. I think it's true or false? Very true. Right. Second one is about a failed transition. In this instance, David had been a very successful king. He himself appointed from nowhere at a time when the competition was far bigger than him. He had handed over to his son Solomon. David had military might and succeeded in that field. Solomon had economic might and a few other weaknesses that I would not mention, but he had built an empire, expanded it. And then it was his turn to hand over, and he chose his son Rehoboam. Great choice, ostensibly. However, when Rehoboam came onto the throne, he faced a dilemma. The first meeting was with a group of labor activists who said the taxation has been very intense in the previous government because they were building. Now that they finished building the temple, the palace, and everything, could you bring down taxes and make life a little easier for us so that we can recover our breath and our lives a little? Then you start taxing us again. It sounded like a very plausible economic suggestion. So Rehoboam goes to the council of state, the elderly people who had tried and tested, people who had advised his father, and said, "What do you think?" They said, "Listen, this is how to win the hearts of people. Listen to what they are saying, help them get stable, and from then on you can bring all your taxes and all your plans." That should have been enough. Then he went to the activists, the young guys, and said, what do you also think? He said, show them that you are in power. Tell them your peace of mind. So he came back and weighed the two options that he had been given and told the people that, well, I've considered the issue you brought to me, and I can assure you that while my father caned you with whips, I will cane you with scorpions. So I'd rather raise the taxes. Of course, by the end of the day, out of 12 tribes, he had 2. 10 seceded that very day. It talks about the fact that when we make choices of people that we hand over the hard work we have built to, and those people don't understand the underpinning issues and the cultural issues and the factors that undergird our decisions, they can really mess us up big time. The third one was about whether to appoint from within or from without. It's a dilemma that always comes. In my interview with Jim Baden on Springboard, the virtual university, I asked Jim, what will you do in appointing a person? Will you choose from within or without? And we had a very interesting debate about it, and I'm sure everyone faces that kind of debate, where somebody's been with you for 10 years, and yet somebody may have come in 1 year or 6 months but has everything you know you need. What do you do? So, in the New Testament example, Judas had betrayed Jesus and had died and needed to be replaced. And so Peter stood up and said, you know what? In the book of Acts chapter 1, verse 21, he said, let us choose somebody who has been with us from the day we started this journey, from the baptism all the way through till now, who knows the institutional memory, who knows everything that we need to know. And so they put forward 2 people, and then they cast lots, and it fell on Matthias. By every stroke of imagination, you will say that was a very logical way to make an appointment. We all know that was the last we heard of Matthias. We didn't hear of him again. And the next time we heard, the one who did all the work in the New Testament was a man named Paul, who had not even walked with Jesus. And that simply means that sometimes, while we all may assume that automatically the person must be from within, somebody who may not have all the institutional memory may actually be the one that you need. None of these constitutes a recommendation. It's just dilemmas that people faced and the choices they made and the consequences. After all, this is a festival of ideas. So it's food for thought as we make our decisions. So, how do we develop a global and a transgenerational perspective? If we say we are building transgenerational entities, how do we develop a mindset that is global and a mindset that is transgenerational? Let me start by saying that you cannot be accidentally global. You cannot go global by accident, that you suddenly found yourself global to your surprise. It won't happen. It must be a result of a deliberate decision. On the 3rd of August, Thursday, exactly 2 weeks ago, we launched our podcast service. And just before I came into this meeting, I checked how many countries are people listening to this podcast on. And there were 17 different countries, from Ghana all the way to China, through Canada, Japan, US, Singapore, Nigeria. I had the percentages, so I know exactly who is listening to us, where they are located, and where our message is reaching. That is deliberate global incursion. And so in all that we are doing, we must determine to go global, we must plan to go global, we must act to go global. Tell the person next to you, determine. The word is determine, because you will not find yourself having global impact just like that. It's a battle you must fight and you must occupy. I was having a discussion with Cynthia Lumo as we strategized about an intervention that we are partnering in next year. And we found out that just by leveraging technology, something that Maximo spoke about this morning, just by leveraging technology, an event that we had that had hosted 5,000 people could literally be multiplied to be available to over 120,000 people just by the power of technology. It is planned and is executed deliberately. So, across board, for anyone here representing any company in any industry, there must be a determination to do something that encompasses, influences, and relates to the entire world rather than a small place of operation. What is transgenerational? Transgenerational simply means that it outlives one generation. And just by definition, a generation is deemed to be the period from when a person is born until when the person starts having their own children. So technically, you can use 30 years for your own work. In that regard, therefore, if you build a company that goes beyond 30 years, it has survived one generation. Our discussion tonight is about how do our companies go beyond 30 years, beyond 60, beyond 90, beyond 100, and outlive that first generation, and not just outlive them, but also achieve sustainable success in the process. One word comes to my mind very clearly, and that is the fact that business longevity is not automatic. We don't have a lot of data here in Ghana, and I recall visiting the Registrar General's department to find out about how many businesses thrive beyond the first year. And Charles Mensah, you will tell us, I'm sure, that many of the businesses that are registered every week don't survive 1 year. I picked out some statistics from the US, and the American Bureau of Labor Statistics say that less than 50% of small businesses successfully make it past the first 4 years of their operation. Less than half. And so starting a business takes off on the propensity or the possibility that you could easily fail. Having said that, if we want to be transgenerational, we must have the appetite for it. The question tonight, do you have the appetite, the desire, the yearning, or the drive to go global and impact multiple generations? My personal quest to go global was informed by a very, very inauspicious experience at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam in 2006 on my way to Germany to watch the World Cup. I like football, everybody knows that. So at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, I meet this young man who comes running towards me, a very enthusiastic, excited young man shouting my name and saying, "I read your books, it changed my life." And I'm like, who's this? At that time, he had written 10 Commandments of Success, and that book had really lit up the whole place. And this young man came shouting, and I was so embarrassed. I was trying to hide, but he just was so happy. He couldn't be bothered by my seeming embarrassment. But after talking to him briefly and he leaving, it struck me that, so if I hadn't written the book, what would have happened to the young man? What impact? What would have given him that impetus to change his life? So it struck me that whatever you are doing that you think you are doing for yourself, that you are doing and you are doing your best at it and saying, well, nobody even sees it, it's changing somebody's life somewhere. So if you put in an extra effort and a conscious effort to extend the boundaries of your influence, something that is being done here in La could transform somebody's life in Cincinnati. What does it take? In the 80s, two researchers called Peters and Waterman wrote a book called In Search of Excellence, and later wrote another book called Management by Walking Around. Very nice title, Management by Walking Around. But in their research, they made an emphatic statement that every organization, every entity, every business, every football club, every political party, every entity seeking to last beyond one generation and very importantly, to make a significant impact in their area of endeavor, must have 7 critical elements present. So I'll leave you with those 7 as I bring my presentation to a close. These 7 they call the 7S framework, or the McKinsey 7S framework. And at the center of this framework was what they believe to be values that are shared by these companies that are the driving force, that picture that is pushing these companies, or that is pushing these businesses, or that is pushing these organizations that they will never compromise on no matter what. I recall on this platform 2 years ago, one CEO saying that their company has had to leave billions of dollars in contracts because it conflicts with their values. I said, wow, that's serious talk. So what do these 7 elements represent? In their research, it said every one of these must connect with the other 6 at every point in time for you to get perfect alignment and perfect execution within your organization. And so if you look at the picture, you find that each one at every point in time connects to the other 6. So let me summarize them for you. Going global and being transgenerational means you must have a strategy that is not rigid. When you are playing chess, or if you are like me and chess is too sophisticated for you, if you are playing drafts, you can get to a point in the game where they can put their marble at a particular place, and the person playing against you can stop and go and drink coffee because there is no way you can move. And they have a name, they call it in the local language. When they put it there, you are finished. And they start laughing. Sometimes a strategy seems good until somebody checkmates you. And when they put it there, listen, you turn right, you lose. You turn left, you lose. So your strategy must be flexible enough to survive a checkmate, or to survive competitor action or environmental change. It must be scalable beyond the borders of this country, something you do. When I was writing our first book, I recall having a discussion with James Ibo White, who said, Albert and Comfort, don't write like you're writing for Ghanaians. Don't say in our country things as if, and use Ghanaian languages without interpretation. Even when you need to make a Ghanaian reference, say in our home country, Ghana, because the person reading may be from Portugal, America, or Spain. Don't assume it's only Ghanaians reading. At that time, we didn't even have one reader, but the foundation was laid right, and we continued with it. It must be scalable, and it must be effectively communicated. Second one is structure. The structure of the company must be robust from the beginning. I recall reading from the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a comment by Robert Kiyosaki, who said, listen, for many people who say they want to build multinational big companies, they are lying. Why are they lying? He says, you have built the foundation for a 1-story building, and now you want to put a skyscraper on it. It won't work. He says, right at the onset, decide to build the foundation of a skyscraper. Because friends, let's agree on one thing. The kind of foundation that they will use to build some of these high-rise buildings in Accra are different from that 1-bedroom that you are building somewhere in Fafraha. That one, they need machines to go down and down and down, and they just keep pouring the concrete and the rods. It's a whole different thing altogether. The kind of substructure we build for our entities must be able to stand the test of time. Solid foundation, not built around one person, and in building the structure, there must be clear roles and responsibilities. The third S stands for systems, a topic that Andrew Akoto spoke to very articulately this morning. Systems, and he spoke also about structures. But systems, it's a word that we like to make a fetish out of, but it's a really simple thing. And that it simply says that there must be a way in which things are delivered and executed that is consistent. So when we talk about systems, this morning somebody was speaking to me and he said, I know every single day at 5 a.m. I go on your Facebook page and I know which message will be there, which kind of message. And I know what will be there at 12 and what will be there at 5 p.m. Let me tell you what. For those of you who think at 5 a.m. I'm on Facebook, at 12 noon I'm on Facebook, and at 5 p.m. I'm on Facebook, I want to submit here and now that I can be chatting with you, or I can be in a business meeting with you at 5 p.m. and then the thing will pop up on Facebook. I'm not there. It's all been scheduled ahead of time. At the time of my choosing, my leisure time, I schedule in advance, whether for a week or for a month. The curriculum is there and it's posted and scheduled, and I go and do other things. And it comes up and people are debating on it, and then I'm watching it and say, great. So it's about a system that you put in place to deliver the mandate that you have. So somebody says, how do you manage to do this and that and this? And it's a system. Tell somebody a system. And technology can make things very, very easy for you. This morning we had a session on leveraging technology and smart solutions. In fact, that is our theme for the whole of next year. On all our platforms, how technology and smart solutions can make life easier for us. And we'll research into how to make things cheaper, faster, easier, more convenient by the power of technology. And the mobile phone will suddenly become such an important tool next year. We will launch it next month on the virtual university. Look out for it. Life will be easier because we will deliberately research into proven ways to do things faster, cheaper, easier, both as individuals and also as companies. The fourth is staffing. When we surround ourselves with the right people, the vision becomes easier to accomplish. So recruitment must be done right, selection must be done right, optimum placement of people in the roles where they can do best, and the team must have balance and strength. Let me take a minute to talk about balance, Moses. Interestingly, you will find that for many people, given the option without a scientific process, we will surround ourselves with people who are just like us. And so if I am an outgoing person, I'm an extrovert, given the chance, I will choose that kind of person for the whole management team or the whole board because that's how I am. And I assume that is the way to be. But balance is important because while you may have some kind of person in a role in marketing, like we discussed on Springboard last Sunday, one kind of person with one kind of outlook may fit for marketing, but not for internal audit. So the balance is very important. The fifth one is skills. Another subject that we discussed this morning, world-class standards with Madam Patience Achanu. So skills must be world-class, and we must invest in training and developing people, and at all levels, find people in the pipeline to follow through. Let me take a minute at this point to say that this is one of the most interesting aspects of building an organization. Bringing somebody straight from university and putting them there, knowing that in the next 5 years, that decision will be justified. And yet, initially, it looks like the person is there doing seemingly nothing, but is being prepared with a particular role in mind or a particular responsibility in mind in the near future. And then somebody asked, what happens when you train them and they leave? And the response is, what if you don't train them and they stay? So train them, number one, train enough of them, number two, and then create the conditions to make them stay. Train people, train enough people, and create the conditions for them to stay. Number 6 is style. Every company has a style. In some companies, they encourage insulting clients. You say, how can I say that? How can I even say that? But you know, when you bang the phone on the client and you mutter those words under your breath in the presence of your staff, you are teaching them by your actions the approved way of doing things. Believe me, they will learn and they will replicate it, good measure, pressed down, shaking together, and running over. And by the time you come chasing the rabbit, it's too late. Oh, they will demonstrate their ability to learn. So what you do communicates the values much better than what you say. Forget about what you've pasted on the wall. It is what we do. Those are our values. Those are the things we believe. So the company style must be customer-centric. Respect must be encouraged both amongst internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. I've written no Rehoboam spirit. That means that attitude that went back to the stakeholders and gave them an unacceptable answer must not be grown within our firms. And very importantly, many firms must work on a documented service charter. That simply says, let's not leave it to chance and let people decide what constitutes as soon as possible. Respond to the email as soon as possible. What is as soon as possible? If the charter says for every email received, the response must be sent within 24 hours. If you send it in 25 hours, it is late. It makes life easier for everybody because we can measure and we can assess and determine variances. If not, somebody's idea of as soon as possible could be 1 week. And they will stand by that and argue for that one. The final one is shared values. The most beautiful situation you can have is where the individual values of the person in the firm are aligned with the values of the organization. And you say, how do you achieve that? And I say, it is very common right here in this hall. I meet people who dress with their companies in mind, who talk, who make decisions, personal decisions with their company in mind. Why? Because they have internalized the company's interests and values and thinking so much that they consider the company in making several decisions. And so for every one of us, we must build our organization to the point where there is some congruence between our personal aspirations and the corporate aspiration. And for every single company, there must be an interest in leaving a legacy. Again, if you see no ESOP spirit there, it simply means that propensity to make long-term decisions based on short-term considerations must be discouraged. Esau said, forget about inheritance. Just give me a bowl of soup now and let's forget. That is making serious, weighty decisions based on short-term, trivial considerations. Let me end where I started, with football. This morning I was told that conflict of interest is solved by disclosure. So I want to fully disclose that I'm a supporter of Manchester United. Having disclosed it, let us do a little 1-minute case study of this team or this coach that Harvard is now describing as the greatest case study in sports success. Ran the club for 27 years and did what was deemed to be impossible in terms of trophies won, impact, knighted, etc., etc. However, as a faithful supporter of the team, I've gone through 3 years of turmoil because after he retired, nothing went right. He chose his successor with all vim, and it went horribly wrong. And they chose the replacement, and that one too went horribly wrong. While we try to rebuild our team and try to find our level again, I want to come outside the football space and confess that at the peak of his powers, when you could win 3 titles back to back, etc., and it was almost like water, nobody ever dreamt that a day will come when this team will be fifth. And so for every one of us here, running beautiful companies in information technology, banking, insurance, whatever area of operation, you may be number 1 in your industry today, but there is no guarantee that you'll be number 1 next year, next 2 years, next 3 years, next 4 years, next 5 years. The lesson from Sir Alex is that even while we are at the top, we still need to be looking at our bench, looking at every area of the company to be sure that in no area of the business are we left vulnerable. Let me leave us with 3 key words. Earlier on in my submission, I said that succession planning is on a three-legged stool. And if you took one out at any point in time, the stool will fall down. Those three words: recruitment, retention, and development. So at all times, let's bring the right people into our organizations. At all times, let's do what it takes to retain them. And at all times, let's do what it takes to develop them. My name is Albert Ocran, and I want to say thank you for your time, and God bless you.